just left off in a head-spinning discussion of the four-tenet system. Exactly. All the philosophical schools, as explained. So this morning, remember this morning? It seems so long ago now. Yeah, this morning must be yesterday by now. But we did go through the four foundations of mindfulness in a kind of a brief way. So if there are any questions to clarify that of course is fair game. And anything else on your mind related to Dharma practice? You have that look of somebody who's leaning for the microphone.
I have a microphone.
There.
I guess you meant me. I didn't have my glasses on, so I couldn't tell. Well, this question was partly recalled to me based on our conversation during the lunch break that I sat in on, and but it's more basic than that. As a beginner, trying to find which text to study to clarify our practice, and sorting through the ones that I can basically understand, I found one that had in its preface, I guess you would call it a warning, or maybe reserving the text for those who had completed the preparation for the text. So I stopped there. I mean, I respected it and honored it, but I wondered about it. I wondered about both the implications of the dangers that would befall someone that continued on without doing the preparation, and that was something that we were discussing over lunch. But there was also the order of what the preparations were. If I can recall them, there were the preliminary practices, which I guess is what you're teaching, and pointing out instructions, and something else that had the guru or yidam in it. They're so new to me, I don't know what they're referring to. But I understood enough of what pointing out instructions meant that it seemed like putting those after the preliminary practices. My question was then, that I wouldn't have thought to ask if we hadn't had the conversation we did downstairs, is why do all practices begin with pointing out instructions? It seems, what would motivate an individual to go through the preliminary practices if they didn't already have some awareness of what the Buddha nature is? Doesn't that seem like a very... well, that's what I'm asking.
Okay. I think the fact that you're asking is an indication that for different people, different motivations will be central. And for some of us, having some sense of clarity about how things, some sense of clarity that that gives us that's how this unfolds. For some of us, that's actually critical to start out with. For others, merely having one method that allows one situation to become more workable is sufficient inspiration. So they're very different they're different kinds of personal outlooks. And I think it's worth appreciating that the lack of a universal student, that we are actually very unique in how we approach this. And that actually for a lot of people, they will find some kind of frustration. I would say actually probably someplace along the line will find some kind of frustration in some formulation of the teaching that makes it sound like, well, what does this have to do with me? I'm not at all motivated by this. I don't know how to put this into practice. In particular, I don't know how this is supposed to be step 2, and it seems it doesn't even have a number from my perspective. It shouldn't be even on the list. I don't know how this works. And other people say, that was obviously step 2. That was so brilliant. The Dharma teaches the Buddha is so brilliant in having come up with step 2. And so we're very, very unique. We're very unique. But as we were talking about just briefly, in some traditions, some things are offered right off the bat. And if you happen to catch if your arm was long enough to reach the brass ring on the merry-go-round and you got it, there isn't a reason to go through all the details along the way. Traditionally speaking, of course, it would be said, that means that somehow all the foundation was actually laid previously in some way or other. That you actually, and they'll speak very traditionally about, in a past life, you must have done exactly this, this, and this, and this, which would make it all conform to this model of how the Dharma works. But the fact is that if we actually really could have some experience seeing directly into our nature, the nature of phenomena, and that resulted in stable realization. Kala Rinpoche had there's one great quote about, I've forgotten exactly how it goes, but it's along these lines. If you could just see, basically it's along the lines of, if you could just see the nature of your own mind, all the elaborations of the sutras and tantras would be irrelevant. Sure. Dora wants to add a clarifier.
I just want to add one small point that Kala Rinpoche, when he taught in the West at least, almost every talk he would talk about the nature of mind. So, and basically it's similar to the content in pointing out instructions. It's just not considered pointing out instructions, I guess, because it's just talking more generally and not trying to lead you through to an experience necessarily. But it was extremely inspirational because it was in fact kind of describing, more the goal and talking about Buddha nature, but basically nature of mind. So in that sense, that is a common approach.
We should also say that in almost all teachings, he would also talk about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, which would be considered the most foundational, the contemplations of precious human existence, impermanence, karma, and the faults of samsara. So very, very foundational things. So he would sort of give both ends of the spectrum almost always. And we will give you a chance to follow up.
So, Michael, your question was so rich with so many layers to it. One thing I picked up was there may be some confusion I certainly have it, about the phrase pointing out instructions. So in general, and this touches on what Dora just shared, in general, the Buddha is giving us, pointing out instructions that inspire us and bring it. But there's a particular meaning in the Kagyu lineage, in the Mahamudra, about pointing out instruction. It's a very personal relationship, very close with the Lama, one-on-one, and they know exactly what's going on in your mind. Most of us don't have those conditions right now in the West. So, yeah, the Dharma is always pointing us in a direction away from suffering, but pointing out instructions are something very precise, personal, and from that karmic connection. I would also say, if you want a good book that's an overview of this lineage, Daring Steps by Ringu Toku. It's in the bookstore. It's quite good. Takes one kind of all the way through from those common preliminaries, uncommon preliminaries, into the Vajrayana and the Mahamudra. So it gives you this arc. So anyway, at the beginning, it's just so much going on, and then after 20 years, there's so much going on. And we just have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. You had a follow-up.
Yeah.
Well, my follow-up was if one of you or all of you could, what you just did, clarify for a beginner what pointing out instruction is, and I think you so intuitively answered that, but
Yeah.
I guess what a beginner would think is that this is a very basic, what is pointed out, what is imparted by the guru to the person whose mind he can see, or she can see into, is at a threshold of awareness. But I just don't see, if somebody doesn't have that basic understanding of what Buddhism is about, why would they go through all the challenges of Buddhist life? I mean, why be... I mean, it's rewarding to be generous to people and kind, but I mean, these preliminary practices seem demanding to me.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
I have to go back to my answer that these things are individual. They are individual, and some of us are just happily, instinctively drawn to certain things, and others people can explain till they're blue in the face, and we will never feel like it makes any sense. We'll never feel drawn. We'll never do the practices because we don't understand them from the side that they work. It just doesn't suit us, which is one of the reasons I said the Buddha taught 84,000 different dharmas, because there are 84,000 different styles of basically confusion. And so that's kind of where that goes. The pointing out instructions can be a very formal thing, but when Dora said what Kalarapasha would do is not formal pointing out, it doesn't matter whether it's formal or informal if you got it in the moment. And it could be something that is entirely incidental, but it's the thing that triggers looking at your experience and awareness in such a way that something just drops. Some level of confusion just drops. So we can't say exactly what pointing out instructions is, but it has been kind of institutionalized to a certain extent, just because we have larger groups of students and people taking instruction over time together. Then you will have teachers offering for people who've done certain things, and then there's a certain kind of center of gravity, you could say, amongst the group of students, then offering something that is a formal pointing out instruction. And sometimes that works because people understand it's a formal situation and they pay attention in a certain way and they get themselves all kind of set up, primed and ready, and they're ready for it. Other times, it doesn't work exactly because people have gotten themselves all primed and ready for it. And then they think it's something, just like Minger, I quoted something like freedom is not what we expect. If we have too formal an idea of what's coming, we won't get it. So it's an interesting business.
I think too I'm just really reaffirming what Bill said about how personal it is. It's quite good, I think, to meditate on why did you come? Why did you come? Whether you had pointing out or not pointing out. I would say I did not have pointing out, but I look back and in some sort of general way I must have. I just came because I felt like I'd suffered so much, as had people around me, and I had no good explanations for it, and then read some Dharma. So you could say in a really general way, there came some minor realization. And after that, it was all about following this person who I was so inspired by. But everyone's going to come in different, and one of the ways, and then proceed differently. One of the things that helped me was one time a teacher pointed out, well, some students come in very drawn to the teachings, some to the teacher, some to the Sangha, that group, and those are all totally legit. There's no, we just come in with our complex karma. And we're lucky if we can hook in somewhere and keep going. Yeah.
Something that comes to mind when hearing about pointing out is, because I started at Tergar with Mindra Rinpoche, he was quoted as saying, "Why give pointing out instructions?" And his comment, his little story was, his analogy was, if I was born and my father left before I knew him, and I was 10 years old, if I had a picture that was, or something that was, my father was pointed out to me, then if I was in a railway station and he passed by, I would go, oh, that's my father. And so that's how he would sometimes refer to it.
Yeah. Yeah. There are many ways that it could be explained. But that the common factor is something that in there that you said, so that you recognize something is offered, so that you actually recognize something. Yeah. I would say that for me, what drew me to the Dharma was something that I would call something more of just an aesthetic draw. Something suited me in a more interwoven way, even down to being really magnetized by the images in Tibetan Buddhism, the environment in which it arose, the mountains, those kinds of things, different sorts of things. So that's, and then but a core piece was that, oh, this is something that can be plumbed. The depths of it can be plumbed by looking directly into the experience of being. That was kind of like, I was in, once I kind of had some confidence that that's what the deal was. So I didn't actually need to know I didn't need to have it really clearly pointed out what the end game looked like, but just that the door was one that I knew that I could work with. The entry was something I could work with. That was my personal entry point. I've only come to appreciate how individual people are over time. It takes a long time to get over yourself.
Must be like
I'm still constantly amazed at how wrong I can get it. So what would be so inspiring for other people? Peter.
Thanks. I was at home trying to do the meditation on phenomena, and I realized this election has got me really nervous coming up. And I couldn't focus. I just go off into all these, what if this, what if that? And I really couldn't focus on just being with observing. I mean, I guess that is phenomenon, but
yes,
it's so intense. A lot of times I can detach, but I'm more engaged than I have in a long time. So it's partly that, I think, and then also just a little afraid of outcomes. So it's really weird for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm not used to that. Not being able to meditate with it as easily as I often can with things. So what do you have any tips about? I mean, it feels like it's a big hurricane of energy.
Shorter.
So any
shorter session, shorter moment, intentionally not exposing yourself to the entirety of the habitual pattern, which includes being lost. We are in the mindfulness phenomena. We are actually supposed to be bringing our attention to what just unfolds, and so at the moment, what you described is that's what's unfolding for you. But the piece that's most hard, I think I said this, that the thing that's hardest about mindfulness of phenomena is it's so close to what we habitually do that the ingredient of being lost in it is so easy to come back that we have to. That's sort of the defining thing between, is it mindfulness of phenomena or is it just what I always do? Are we lost? So if we actually since you kind of know this is coming, sort of like this is like Michael used to use the example of the staff meeting where you know you're going to meet the difficult person. This is the method in which I am most likely to lose it fast. Therefore, what am I going to do? How am I going to approach it? And approaching it as though you're just going to touch it for a moment, and then turn your attention to something like the vivid sensation of the breath. Release that. Touch the hurricane for a moment. And that can allow for some moments of freedom within that can stop. It won't be the same hurricane. The concerns, the lack of certainty about how things are going to turn out, the deep concern about the potential downsides, all those things, they're not going to like disappear just because we're meditating. But being able to actually touch that, the wind, touch the wind. To sense the wind a little bit, and see just what is that wind? What is that? But briefer is always better in these regards. If we go back to pointing out instructions are not something that is sort of this generalized thing. It is a matter of the recognition that happens, right? And so the problem that we have in terms of having confidence is generally a matter of, well, if it's just like that, what good is it? I want it, just now I want the super glue on it. And I want it done. And I want some sort of finish to boot. It always is going to unfold moment by moment. And even moment by moment is kind of a bit of a funny thing. But that's where we start from. Seeing time in terms of the unfolding of moment by moment. But being able to just meet over and over again. One of the things, another little bit that I saw in Mingyur Rinpoche's book was he's talking about how his father said he expressed the same kind of sort of lack of confidence about things unfolding. It's sort of like it's just one drop. He said, "You can fill up a cup, drip by drip." And we have to have the cup there. And that's, in a certain way, that's where dedication comes in. We catch one drip, dedicate. And in the dedication, we actually we need to have some kind of respect for what it is and appreciation for the potency of one drip when added to another drip, when added to another drip. And in that way, if we can kind of have a more open-hearted view of how our practice can unfold, and understanding and kind of giving ourselves more credit for kind of the incredible work that we have done. So those are just some thoughts that come to mind. Do you have new dimensions, thoughts that come to mind in response? Something to add as dialogue?
It's just that it's hard to do one drop and turn away in this context.
Yes.
But it's worth a try.
Yeah.
I think it's just because it's, I don't know, it's been so long since I've had something that intense, this much, and I hadn't really acknowledged it till this morning about the level of anxiety I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think helping acknowledge it, then once I recognize it, then it's a lot less. It can become a lot less very quickly. So I think this will be very helpful on that regard.
We should wish ourselves luck in all this.
Yeah.
Well, on that piece, wish ourselves luck. Do what we can. Let go of the outcome. And then, whatever the outcome, do what we can. But my first thought, Peter, was, because I share so much of what you're describing in this time, if I'm sitting there being mindful of phenomena, it sounded like, and I wonder about this, were you more focused on the stories? What if this and what if that? And when I go there, I see, okay, stories, future, not here, just that quick of a thought. Then focus on the anxiety. That's a phenomenon. And again, not analyzing it, but what I do then is go back on the body, like where body mindfulness, like almost feeling the chemicals in a way, which helps. I mean, because I can feel they're moving, shifting. There's no thing called anxiety that's got me. So that helps me. Is part of the phenomena, right? Although there's a confusion for me because then you're back on the body. So are you, wanted to ask that, are you now doing, not that it matters. I don't care if I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4. I care if I'm aware. But if
Well,
I'm...
that is going back to mindfulness of the body, basically.
Yeah. But isn't the anxiety a phenomena?
Sure. So are the stories.
Yes. Yeah. So that's all phenomena.
Being caught in the stories and being lost, losing the awareness is where the mindfulness of phenomena becomes very slippery.
And that loss is a phenomena.
Yes, the lack of awareness, though, takes you out of that. You're no longer in the meditation.
Right.
When you've
Right.
that, in this case, distraction is that loss of awareness.
And the distraction's a phenomena.
That,
If you
well,
can
distractedness. It's funny, when we use the word distraction, it sounds like a noun, like it is the thing.
Yeah.
Like the story is the distraction. In this case, it's not. Distractedness is just merely losing the continuity of awareness.
Okay. It's a verb, not a noun. Okay, got it.
So, but it's a reason. It's a reason that your response is an entirely valid approach. When we recognize that actually the continuity of awareness is so fragile. And it's also a reason to either go at it in kind of very narrow time slices, or to shift to another method.
Right. And no, I'm moving to mindfulness of body now.
Yeah.
So, but knowing that's what I'm doing, because I'm going on my bodily sensations of anxiety, because the stories just are sweeping me into my normal delusions.
I think the hard part is then, I mean, I like the rule of thumb, do what you can and let go of the outcome. I mean, that's a core guideline for me too. And just knowing what is that? How do you know, there's always more you can do. Up to a point, you know, I mean, so.
Yeah.
And balancing that, then it's not the end of the, not going to be the end of the world or anything. It's just, it's not all or nothing, and it's just another event that's happening. Yeah. So, so I'm not going to skip meals to go canvas, basically. But I am going to go canvas and do, or help other ways, whatever ways that is, between now and Tuesday. So, as much as I can see is helpful for me to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be, I think watching the breath is good, and doing long walks is also good for me. Yeah. To get it out of the body, because for me, once anxiety is in my body, it helps to move it somehow.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting is the canvassing, the phone calls will go better if you're at peace inside. If you're like, oh my God, we're all going to die, and you show up at my door, I really don't want to talk with you. You know?
Over the past several days, I've reflected with similar profound concerns. And sometimes when those kinds of feelings arise for me, I think in historical terms about other beings, other humans who've lived through even more profoundly challenging circumstances, and thinking of how it is that we have relied on their courage, their perseverance, and all the rest that carried them through those times, and that we're the beneficiary of those people. And that somehow allows me to think about the notion of letting go of the outcome in a certain way. That if the outcome doesn't happen the way I want it right now, that I still have to keep doing what I can do. It may change and radically restrict or all what I can do, or change what it is that I must do. But that reflection, stepping outside of the particulars of this historical moment, has been helpful for me. That's generally helpful for me to appreciate how resilience has arisen in the mind stream of beings over millennia, just in the last century, other places. That's actually it's very helpful for me helps me a little bit get over myself, kind of my particular worry, and think, no, actually I'm a piece of something much bigger, in that I have wider responsibilities than just to hope it turns out exactly the way I want. Suvansh.
This is not related to the political situation. So I've come across this teaching by in this instant it's by Gampopa, but I think by some others also, and I think when I hear it, it makes me think about a facet of expectation and practice. This is by Gampopa, and sent out by Matthew Ricard recently. It said, "In the beginning you should be pursued by the fear of birth and death, like a deer escaping from a trap. In the middle you should have nothing to regret, even if you die at this moment, like a peasant who has worked his land with care. And in the end, you should be happy like someone who has completed an immense task." I find this very inspiring, and I wanted your comments on it, because I think often, and this year especially, I've been doing Nundro regularly. So Nundro is a big practice for me this year, 2018. And I find, wow, it's a lot of work. and I sometimes the thought will come up, oh, nothing's happening, right? I mean, it's like, in my mind, somewhere in the back of my mind, maybe not this year, maybe over the years, there's like an expectation, oh, so much investment, so much time, and no miracles as yet, right? So when I read, this and other quotes like this, where they say, especially in the middle, right? In the middle, you should have nothing to regret, even if you die at this moment, like a peasant who has worked his land with care, right? This seems to, for me at least, the interpretation here is keep at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear your comments.
Dora.
Say a small point. I mean, I take that so if you would die with no regrets while you're in the midst, that means that you're really confident that this is the best thing you could be doing with your life, with your time. It doesn't say that you've achieved anything necessarily. You don't have to feel that you've achieved anything, but that what you are doing is that valuable. So you would have no regrets if that's what you're doing when you're hit by the bus. And I think it's that confidence that's being talked about.
Yeah. It seems so clear to me that I'm not sure what I can add to it. What would you want me to add?
Just your have you, all of you, right, have been practicing for many years, and how do you approach it? It's like day in and day out, right? The afflictions are there. It's not that you may have spent a lot of time, but at least I'm speaking for myself, right?
No, not just for yourself. Yeah, the expectation that the afflictions are going to go away, or that there's going to be something kind of dramatic. I think I'll just go back to the thing that Mingyur Rinpoche quoted, that the cup can get filled drip by drip. And if we're filling the cup, then that's good. That's good. And to have some kind of appreciation for the drips. And sometimes we're like with Mundro, we can feel like we're just walking back and forth between the sink. And it's a long way from the sink with one drop, and then we put it there. Then we have to walk a long way back and get another. We're putting something in a cup with a hole in the bottom, so that all that's left by the time we get over here is one more drip. So it can feel like there are times when it can feel like not much is happening. But to go back to the quote from Mingyur Rinpoche about, what was it? Somebody said, freedom rarely arrives in the form we think it should. So the notion that we would be able to recognize the preciousness of what we're doing is part of that. We do need to have some things along the way that kind of jog us into a sense of confidence and appreciation. But sometimes they're few and far between. And particularly if we're expecting those things to arrive in the guise of something that we recognize, that we expect. This is what it would look like if I was really making progress. There are times when it's like you've gone from the coarse sandpaper to the next finer sandpaper. You keep going like this, and it really doesn't look like it's changing that much. It takes a long time before the next thing shows up and you recognize what it is. It takes time. But within that, particularly with a practice like Mundro, it's good to keep in touch with people and kind of find things that, like, this is my question of the moment. This is either where I see some kind of elusive opportunity or some kind of challenge, that's something I just can't seem to kind of connect with something. To be able to talk about those things then can allow for, it's like a sense of, oh, I heard that drip go into the cup. And it went splash, so I know there's something in the cup. We can have a little bit more confidence then. But a lot of it is just going back to appreciating the depth of samsara. When we say, oh, like the afflictions are still there, we could go, oh no, the afflictions are still there. But we can say, oh yes, you see, I'm now beginning to appreciate the depth of the work that's involved. So I don't know.
I have a couple of thoughts. One is Lama Michael, when I was in the one-year retreat and doing Nundro, feeling like, oh my God, especially, when you're 67 doing the prostrations some more or again. And I went and talked with him, and he just, how he's so light, and he just smiles at me and he says, Zopa, practice now for your next life. And it was like, oh, what am I thinking I'm going to see or get right now? So again, it was, you don't even know. Keep going for next life. And then it hooks with Lama Eric in our retreat on insight and calm abiding. He said it over and over, we're in this for a long game. This is a long game, like beginningless, endless time. It's long. So we have to let go of the outcome. It's the same as go do your canvassing, do it peacefully, let go of the outcome. Outcomes occur. You know what you're going to keep doing, no matter who's elected or whether you were tired yesterday or you got high off of it, which can happen with Nundro. Doesn't matter. You know what you're doing the next day and know why you're doing it. But the third thing is I have gotten more clear now. I did my Vajrasattva in 2004 to 04 to 05. And I now experience some of the results. I felt I would never, what results? What results came from all that? But they don't stop. Mm-hmm. They keep going because somehow, of course, as we continue to practice, there's an enhancement that goes on. So I don't say that to set up expectations. Let go. It's not anything I could have imagined or even wanted, Does that help? It's just to get up every day and do it. Create the new habit. You must have some faith in it, reasoned faith based on some connection. And that's it. And yeah, it's hard. It's designed to put, because we did Vajrasattva in a concentrated 3 months in a group of 7 together in a room. And every day, 8 to 9 hours, no days off. It's just pounded away. And you got through boredom, anger, exhaustion, joy, everything. And you just
have to
saw.
get over the joy.
What's that?
You have to get over the joy too.
Yeah, you got to get over the joy because the next day it's gone. And part of it is just designed to push the body and mind through that sieve. So it's like, oh, everything's shredded now, to some degree. That's the point. It's got to be hard. Otherwise, we just keep doing our same habits for comfort. So if it feels hard, that's a great sign. If it feels hard and you're still doing it, that's so cool.
Yeah, what we usually do, freedom feels not only unfamiliar, but distinctly unpleasant. That's because we're used to our chains. They might chafe, they might make us bleed, but at least they're familiar. So, yeah. You mentioned a sense of certain things unfolding over a very long period of time, and I would say that that's definitely true as well. And one of the things that I don't know how many of you remember Lamatashi, who lived at KCC for a while, but he said after, not too long after Dora and I came back from our one-year retreat, he was sitting there and he turned over and said, "You won't know what you've done for at least a year." And it was true. There wasn't a sense that, oh, I did this and now I know what I've done. To the extent that I had it, I had a very different sense a year later, where things were unfolding, and even 10 years later, 20 years later, things unfolding in a certain way. I know they're very connected to what I did in that intensive way. So that's another piece of general encouragement in the middle of that. So also, in the middle of retreat, a lot of the time I just felt like, okay, I'm getting up and I'm doing the same thing that I did yesterday, and it feels kind of the same, and I don't feel any brighter or enlighteneder than I did the day before. But there's something cumulative in it. So you can report back in 20 years.
Just one other thing. Ken MacLeod said to us, there's this Tibetan saying about Nindro, perhaps better to have not started. But if you started, don't quit. It's like a joke, like when they're in the middle of it, like, oh my God, this is so hard. Maybe I should have never started. But if you started, don't quit. Keep going.
How many were familiar with the 4 foundations of mindfulness from some time previous? Sure, yeah, I'm just partially familiar, yeah. Just interested. We haven't done it in quite a while, at least since we were back at Monroe Street, I think, in any kind of organized fashion. But there's so many of our practices that in one way or another fit into that, where if you understand that frame of reference for practice, then if you hear an instruction, there's some kind of appreciation of a context for it. And it can kind of clarify some things that might otherwise feel like they're, like, I'm not sure where this fits in. Peter.
Along that line, when I used to study Dharma way back, we used to call it mindfulness of dharmas.
Mm-hmm.
Dharma being Dharma with a small d for phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, and that helps me look at it as composite phenomena, not as immediately I drop the this is real chair kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, do you have any insight into why that it seems to be changing the word from phenomena? To me is too broad. I mean, too generic.
Well, I don't necessarily particularly like it, but it's one of the common ways to refer to the four foundations of mindfulness, or the 4 close applications of mindfulness, to go with Alan Wallace's terminology. But in a certain way, one of the things I've concluded is that actually any label on that, it almost gets in the way of actually doing it.
And is the doing it, are we supposed to be looking at things phenomenologically, just as our perception things come in, or as after we interpret that it's a chair, or?
All of those.
All of those.
Yes. The kind of the whole compositing mechanism, kind of the active, on-the-fly compositing mechanism that involves how all those things come together. So from that point of view, phenomena is kind of like a bit of a weak word, because it's as much process as object.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have any comments on that? Sanskrit word is dharma. So.
Because it's from the Abhidharma.
Jeff, did you follow up on that? Did your question want to follow on that? Okay.
Okay. Close application of mindfulness on phenomena. Tell me if this is, how would I phrase that? Because I would start getting confused now with that last conversation. I think of it as anything that's going on in the present moment that I can put my attention on, and everything that I can put my attention on. Like, which is all the levels of it, being color, light, shadow, sound, feeling, all the senses, all at once, every damn thing. Even my attitudes toward everything.
Yeah. And the simpler we can be about just being present in that. And at some point we have to go, oh yeah, it is all of this. And then we'll start to make a list. And then at some point you have to kind of have a little laugh and say, you can't make a list.
My basket's not big enough.
Yeah. The basket, the contents get bigger than the basket could get, faster than the basket could get bigger. So then you can relax with that.
So then there's a phrase that goes with that sounds very Dharma, but I got this little phrase from an art writer who I really appreciate. He mentions simply that the world is continually appearing and disappearing. continually appearing and disappearing. And when I get to that point of I can't fit it in my basket, there's no point in holding a basket, then sometimes it just goes into seeing it appear and disappear continually, like just rolling. And that, like what it is. And then you were talking about, then just drop it. Like once you've touched the hurricane, I love that. Drop, step back, take a break. Or, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
There is, depending on how we approach this, we've been approaching this mainly from the point of view of calm abiding, how to attend to different aspects, domains of experience. When you go farther with this practice, as you go along, it becomes clear that this is actually an insight practice. And the first aspect of that is insight according to what we call the first turning. Because you mentioned like the composite aspect. And when we say, okay, here I am, and just this is reality. What am I going to do about it? Then you stop and look and say, well, actually, this experience arises, and from these different domains of experience are components. So in the first turning, one of the key elements in stepping away from the patterns of harmful activity and harmful and confused thinking is to see some spaciousness in that, and to not be trapped by the sense that this is just a solid reality, and what I think I see is exactly what it is, and my reactions are just this natural, thing that should happen. This is exactly, and I'm kind of stuck in the middle of this. And so, being able to step back and the way you were talking about being able to take and place the attention on the physical experience of anxiety. And sort of see it, but you have to do that. You have to actually have some sense of an ability to see the story and the physical experience as not being glued together as one single thing. And so from that perspective, then, actually, I can allow myself to sit with this physical experience. And I don't come back with a feedback loop of stories to keep it whipped up and churned up. So that's a first cut at a level of insight. Just being able to see that there's space in there, some degree of freedom within that. And then as we go farther into it, then the looking at the experiences themselves, just as we go from the first turning, where this kind of deconstructing is a critical piece of the practice. Then the second turning, in the first turning we would talk about the composite, kind of the whole composite as the skandhas, with this kind of ball of wax that's been put together. Which in the 4 foundations of mindfulness actually map, not one for one, because you have 5 skandhas, 4 foundations of mindfulness, but it does map pretty well, and it does allow us to do the thing that was done in the first turning, is deconstruct this web of entanglement. In the second turning, then we run into the Heart Sutra, and in the Heart Sutra, the line that kind of always jumps out, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And we go there. But most people don't know that there's actually, that is actually just the first of the 5 skandhas. So it's actually the Heart Sutra is actually referring to all 5 skandhas. The skandha of form is emptiness on through all the skandhas. And from that point of view, then we're looking directly, not just kind of divide and conquer, but what's the nature of each of these, you could say, domains of experience, kind of looking into those and seeing how those go. So it goes progressively deeper. But having the framework of the 4 foundations, I've found to be a helpful piece of understanding. Even if we say, actually, I'm good, just follow the breath, I'm good there. But it does help when we hear other instructions to know, oh, actually, just follow the breath. That's mindfulness of the body. It's one aspect of that. If we hear instructions of place your attention on kind of the strong emotion of anger, we can understand that in the context of mindfulness of the mind. So if we hear the instruction, just essentially rest in open awareness, we're really close to the mindfulness of phenomena. So all those things have it's a good frame of reference to be familiar with, which I thought was a good enough excuse to indulge my own wish to go back and do it again.
Is there time for more?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay. This is a continuation on that, what's coming up because of the what's going on in the world, and the instruction of do our best and then let drop. It's also a form of deconstructing, decoupling. What's been coming up for me is a short video I saw recently, a piano tuner in London who decided to become homeless. He's doing his piano tuning and he owns nothing but his bike and a phone and his equipment for tuning, some clothes. He's never been happier. And then coming in my mind at the same time is Mingyur Rinpoche's instruction for Tonglen. Breathe in the suffering, breathe out the joy, the warmth, the positives. And don't worry too much about the details. And so seeing the suffering, and it doesn't matter what the specifics are, cut off the storyline, I guess is how this isn't a question so much as exposing what I'm noodling about and what's surfacing as a way of thinking out loud and putting it out there so I can see, oh, that's, or to hear some feedback. But it's the sense of connect with the suffering, connect with the need, but not the details. And then do what I can, knowing I don't know enough, but try. And then at the back of it is still that piano tuner who said, we don't need anything to be happy. We don't need any things to be happy. So this stuff's swirling around, but it's part of what's helping me try my best and let go. Hope for the best, hope for more, accept what is. And it's that little teeter-totter, which brings the tears and the calm and the tears and the... But I will be going home and still hearing what you've said. But if you want to add anything, great.
Yeah. I think it's the one thing that I would add is that we often talk about cutting off the story. And so every once in a while I have to say something in favor of the story. Because the stories that we tell ourselves are double-edged. To the extent that we entrap ourselves with things and carry on cycles of that are unhelpful, then of course, good to be able to find that space of freedom where you don't sustain the story. But our story is also where we can figure out things, where we can develop. That's at our level. That's how we cultivate discernment. So if we can be careful in our story, in the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we tell others, there's also something very beneficial. So there are times when we start to we get fascinated with some aspect of the technique, and we can lose track of a broader picture. It's like oh, the story's always bad. The story's always bad. We should have absolute stillness in the mind. Nothing should ever happen. No. Keeping our eye on what's helpful and what's harmful, that's really important.
Another positive part of the story is if I tune out the story, I'm denying somebody else what somebody else is trying to share. There's an aspect of tuning out their history, what they see as their story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way I experience it is the story's the mud that the lotus grows out of. The story's the mud that the lotus grows out of. Of course, the lotus is in the story too, but, mucking around there, a lot gets learned. The piece that helps me is just to stay aware it's a story. And when I think the story is reality, then I suffer. And I want to go back to one thing you said, Peter. You said something like there's always more to do, like say in this election or pick anything, there's always more to do. That idea doesn't work for me anymore. What works better is, well, it actually includes that. There's always more to do, and this is the amount I can do with kindness. And when I cannot do it with kindness, I am only adding to the suffering. And I mean kindness to self and kindness to everyone. Like just example, I was wanting to do calls and stuff for certain Senate races, not ours, but let's say Texas.
Just for example.
Just for example. I couldn't because my brother got really, really sick. And I had to spend my time driving up to Olympia and taking care of very sick old people, one of whom ended up in the hospital, and hours and hours of doing that. And I just had to let go of that and go, this is what's in front of me, this, here. And my brother, votes the way I don't like. But, he's not voting this time because he's too sick. I'm not rejoicing in that, but it's like you just don't know whatever is in front of you, and then you measure your capacity, and then you be kind to yourself. That's what I think activists often leave out. And in that not being kind to self, we're not kind to anybody we contact. And they know that and they see it. So I just want to say that part. Because the kindness is the thing the world needs more than X as president or Y as governor or Z as the mayor. That's all going to shift around anyway, at some point. But the kindness is what there's huge need for. So that's what you can give. That's what I can give. That's not there enough. So that's how I see it.
Perhaps we can just take a very short break, do what's needed, and then we can sit for a bit and do our Mahamudra aspiration prayer. But before you go, do you want any more instructions on anything for sitting, or do you feel confident to just take some aspect of the practice and run with it? Sounds like you're ready to run with it. All right, so we'll just sit.
We're having a break.
Yes, you will have a break. Yeah. Yeah, you'll kind of keep track of this. This is not a break to kind of expand out like that until somebody else brings you back. This is a break to bring yourself back from as you're done with